Michael is a historian and archaeologist, and a splendid one in both. And he's going to talk us about this magnificent civilization, the Sogdians, and its end of it, and perhaps its integration of elements of it into Islamic civilization. So yes, in a really crucial, an understudied and exciting region in a crucial time. So I'm very excited about this. Michael, please, could you tell us about your own journey first, and then as it is the custom of the Majlis, Sunnatul Majlis, and then we go with you to Sogdiana.
Well, good evening, everyone, and Istvan, thank you very much for this invitation and for the opportunity to talk about Sogdians to this audience. As you will immediately understand, and I begin to talk about my own journey to Sogdiana, I still feel very much like an imposter. Then I step into the Islamic studies and talk to mostly audience composed of Arabists and people dealing with Islamic civilizations. Nevertheless, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm more than happy to see some colleagues and friends, and a very important part of Sanjar-Shah team of our excavations this September. And I'm also very glad that I'm speaking actually after the presentation given by Said Reza, which is great because he had already presented some of the most important outlines. Hi, Said Reza. Most important problems and outlines dealing with the Arab conquest of Khorasan, and unfortunately, I was not able to join it in real time, but I very much enjoyed watching it. And Said Reza treated Sogdiana and Bactria together for some parts of his presentation, which makes sense indeed, because this is what the Arabs did for most of this period, certainly from the administrative point of view. But nevertheless, I will concentrate on Sogdiana, and in this period, these were very distinct regions with different culture, languages, and warfare traditions, and everything. But before that, following the wonderful tradition of this Majlis, I would like to share my PowerPoint. Just a second. Please tell me if you can all see it. Great.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So before we come to Sogdiana, and before we cross the Oxus together with the Arab armies, and to get to what is beyond the river, to Mawara Nahar, we must do a journey. And sorry. Oh. When I talk about my own journey to Sogdiana, I really got this inspiration from a book from 1982, which is called Journey to Sogdiana in Russian. It is a very nice, popular book that the cover you can see here. And so I will tell a few words about how I ended up where I am now. And of course, I first no, I will begin rather differently. Um, Already when I was 6, I wanted to be an archaeologist. And the earliest book that I remember myself holding in my hands was a book about Romanian history. It was my grandfather's book, whose mother tongue was Romanian. So he had some books dedicated to Romanian history, and of course I couldn't understand the word, and it was also written in different script. But I remember vividly beautiful pictures because I don't know how are the histories of Romania nowadays. But that book was largely dedicated, of course, to the Roman Empire and to the Roman Dacian War. So it was all about beautiful reproductions of Trajan's column from Rome. And as long as I can remember myself, I wanted to be an archaeologist. So when I was admitted to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in 2002, I started learning archaeology and history. And of course, I wanted to be an archaeologist of Greek and Roman period, everything that I read since I was a teenager, books like, I don't know, Herodotus and Plutarchus and things like that. And also in Israel, where we have our own school of archaeology, but it is uh, mainly focused on Israel. I mean, archaeology in Israel is archaeology of Israel. So during my BA, I studied archaeology of Israel with an emphasis on classical archaeology. I studied general history. I tried to did some classics, ancient Greek, and when I wanted to start MA, of course, I was looking for a subject and I was fascinated by the Hellenistic period. I wanted to do Hellenistic period. And I started to read about the Seleucid Empire, which was a large kingdom, and very quickly I came to read. I started to read books about the Seleucid East, about Iran, Central Asia, and India, because I read Russian. That's my mother tongue, and I already read French by this time. So I started to read a lot about the Hellenistic East, but still I wanted to find a subject that is connected, of course, to Israel, because that was my, I mean, my natural point of reference, and this is what I was thinking about in this period. So I came to my supervisor, to my MA supervisor, Professor Joseph Patrick, who is a great archaeologist of Second Temple period in Israel, of early Christianity, of the Nabateans. And I started to share with him my thoughts um, about the subject, possible subject of the dissertation. I told him, listen, it's very interesting. Maybe I will compare something that we have in Iran and in Central Asia. Look, there are very interesting things with what we have in Israel. And I remember it, I remember it really well. He looked at me and he told me, Michael, you're telling me about such fascinating and interesting things in the East, and you read Russian and you read French. Why do you want to do now archaeology of Israel? There are so many people working here. I mean, go and try to look what is really in the East. And I said, oh, okay, maybe makes some sense. And I started to concentrate and to read more about the Hellenistic period and Hellenism in the East and in Iran and Central Asia and in India. And very quickly, I realized that the most interesting things there and the things where the field of research is really huge, and the potential for research and the questions that one can still ask, the research questions that one can still ask, are really big questions. So the real interesting thing there are not the Greeks, but the Iranian people. So I realized that I need to study ancient Iran. And here I was lucky again, and you will see that my entire journey to Sogdiana was just a coincidence of some extremely lucky encounters. And all such station brought me somehow closer to the place where I was now. So I thought, well, I must now learn something about ancient Iran. So what should I do? I looked up in our university who is a specialist in ancient Iran, and I found that we have a prominent specialist of ancient Iran. Only later, much later, I realized how lucky I was to study with this man, Shaul Shaked, who was one of the prominent Iranian philologists and specialists in Zoroastrian religion in the 20th century. So I came to him and asked him questions. He was very patient, listening and answering to my completely ignorant questions. And I started studying Middle Persian. I started studying Modern Persian. I started reading everything I could find about Zoroastrianism. And I was, again, extremely lucky that I had access to his library, which is probably the greatest library on ancient Iranian studies in our region, certainly. Shaked unfortunately passed away. It's already 4 years ago, and I miss him very much every day. But he became my supervisor, and I wrote my MA first on because I also became interested in religion, so I thought that I would like to do something about temples. So I wrote my MA on temples in the Iranian world in the Hellenistic period. And then I was looking for a subject on PhD, and my friend back then suggested me that told me that he would like to read a book about the representations of Zoroastrian and ancient Iranian deities. And I remember thinking, well, that's actually a very interesting idea. So I came with it to Shaked and to Patrick, and they approved it. And I started to work on it, and again to read a lot about Zoroastrianism. But this is where my first serious engagement with visual culture starts, and with iconography, representations of gods. I started to assemble paintings and coins, and also references to ancient Iranian religion and practices, especially related to visual representations in all kind of sources. And that was my PhD, and that was my first book. And here comes my another lucky encounter with Professor Franz Grenet, um, who came to Jerusalem to a conference. Then I was thinking and just laying the foundation of my PhD research. And again, I was very lucky to meet him. He's now at Collège de France, but he's one of the best specialists of pre-Islamic Central Asia, archaeology, art, and religions. And he's extremely knowledgeable man. He possesses brilliant memory and vast knowledge, but most of all, is exceptionally generous man. It is again only later then talking with other students and other colleagues, I realized how lucky I was in this journey to meet these people, because not all supervisors. I was really surprised to find out that not all supervisors are like that. But I was extremely lucky to meet Franz Grenet, who is one of very rare people in academia who does not uh, take disagreement with his ideas or positions personally. On the contrary, he encourages students and colleagues to have an argument with him, and he really values discovery and contribution to knowledge above anything else. And if you disagree with him, it is never personal. But again, back in the day, I thought that's normal. That's how all people in academia are. Unfortunately, later I found out that not all well, people after all are people, and people are very different. But again, I was really lucky during my PhD that I worked with these people, and I had their support during all this journey. And the best I can do is to try to to take an example and to try to emulate them with my students now. And Franz Grenet really served as my informal supervisor. He supported me to come to Paris and to study in Paris. That was very important for me and for my formation, and attending lectures at the Collège de France, studying with him and with people like Jean Quilens and Avesta and other people, because Paris back then and still is, I think, the most important, at least one of the most important centers for ancient Iranian and Central Asian studies. And well, I was working on ancient Iran, but of course, as an Israeli, it was impossible for me to go to Iran and to go to Afghanistan. And what kind of archaeologist you are if you are not digging anything? Of course, I participated in excavations in Israel, but that was back in my students' day, and I wanted to get a field experience of Central Asia, of the Iranian world. So it was a natural choice for me, and I was destined to go to Central Asia. And with the help of Franz Grenet and the French archaeological mission in Central Asia in 2010, I first went to Uzbekistan, to Central Asia. I worked with the French Uzbek excavation team at Sangir Tepa. You see me here a little bit younger and thinner than today. with Mutalib Hassanov, a great field archaeologist who taught me a lot, as much as field archaeology as you can teach in one season. He was in Samarkand. He's currently at Fergana State University, and that was also the year that when my affection and my connection with Central Asia and the people of Central Asia started, and of course all the things beyond that go together with the archaeological expedition. The most important thing are always the people, and I really fell in love with them, and it continues until today. The people of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Again, in Tashkent, again, I was very lucky to meet with Edward Vasilievich Tviladze, who was again passed away a few years ago. Who was one of the last giants of Central Asian archaeology, of the golden age of Central Asian archaeology from the Soviet period. One of the few people who excavated almost in all the Central Asian republics and also in Afghanistan. Extremely generous and kind man who helped me a lot in Uzbekistan, and allowed me to work at his library. And it is the encounter with such people that really shaped us, and working on my dissertation also brought me for the first time to the late period, to the period of the Sogdian civilization, because as you can understand by now, I started, well, my interest was in antiquity, in the Hellenistic period, and I never thought that I would find myself presenting to an audience interested in Islamic studies. That was never the period that I was interested in. I was interested in again in the Hellenistic period, in the Kushan period, but not, of course, not in the Arab conquest, but working on the iconography of deities in the Iranian world also brought me in contact with the extraordinary world of Sogdian art and Sogdian paintings. And another crucial encounter was in 2010. Then I was able to go on one day from Uzbekistan to Tajikistan and visit for the first time the site of Penjikent. And it was really, as I understand now, a career-changing encounter and experience. Here you see my picture with the members of the Penjikent expedition. Here, can you see my pointer? Yeah, here is Pavel Lurie, my dear friend and the director of the Penjikent archaeological expedition. And this is Sharov Kurbanov from Tajik Academy of Sciences, who is the co-director of Penjikent expedition, and my colleague and dear friend and co-director of Sanjar-Shah expedition. Back in 2010, the border between Uzbekistan and Tajikistan was open. It was closed a year after, and for 7 years it was impossible really to get from Penjikent to Samarkand because the border crossing was closed. It is only in 2008 that we were able again to visit freely Samarkand, and the border was open. So I was very lucky that I really caught this moment and this window in 2010, and we only went for 1 day, but it was enough to see the site of Penjikent and to see the site of Sanjar-Shah and other sites. And then I went back to Jerusalem, and then I went to Paris, and in 2013 I finished my dissertation. And in 2013 I received an email from Pavel Lurie telling me, do you want to come to Tajikistan to work with Sharov? He has a site of Sanjar-Shah. He was working with he needs a colleague who would also who speaks English and who can serve as coordinator with Society for Exploration of Eurasia. This is a private Swiss foundation which supports a number of excavations in Central Asia, including Sanjar-Shah excavations. I didn't even hesitate. I immediately said yes because of Sharov. He wrote me, "You're going to work with Sharov." I said yes. I didn't even think about Sanjar-Shah, that it was late, because when we visited it in 2010 and Sharov showed us around, well, the site was spectacular, but he told me it was late. It was 7th century. And I never thought that I should come and excavate there, and the period was very late for me. But the most important thing in I think in archaeology is your partner. Maybe in life in general, I don't know. But in archaeology, certainly, you must have a reliable partner, and the one that you can rely on, and you can work with him, so then I met Sharov in 2010. It was an immediate connection between us, and he suggested me to Pavel Lurie, and I immediately agreed. And this is how I came to this place in 2014, to the site of Sanjar-Shah, that I'm going to talk about it later, and to show you some results from it and some material from it, which is related to the story of the Arab conquest. And we started working in 2014. And of course, when I started to excavate again at Sanjar-Shah, a Sogdian site, I started to read everything I can about the Sogdians, and to study Sogdians. Because before that, I remember it very clearly. In 2010, then I came to Penjikent, and Pavel and again my colleague who is now in Paris and dear friend Yuri Karev, they were discussing Sogdians and events of the Arab conquest, and all these names were thrown, and I was just listening. I remember it. I was sitting near the Rudaki Museum in Penjikent, and they were talking between them, Nasr ibn Sayyar, Gura, Kutaiba, and I didn't understand anything. Those were just names for me, and I was not even really very much interested in that. Back in the day, I was very much interested in Zoroastrianism and in gods, and not in the story of the Arab conquest. But gradually, since 2014, the finds and the site dragged me deeper and deeper into this Sogdian and then the history of the Arab conquest, and dragged me also closer and closer in time into the 6th and 7th and 8th and even into the 9th century. And now I find myself even being interested in reading things about the Samanid period because we have a very interesting and important occupation level and stage from the Samanid period. Yeah, I'll show you some pictures from our life in the excavations and the palace and the paintings. You will also see back in the day, a couple of years before, and wonderful finds from Sanjar-Shah. And again, my luck continued, the luck that I had with teachers and mentors and advisors continued with students. Again, you see me here excavating a fragment of wall painting together with Abdurrahman Pulotov, who was first a student of Sharov. Then he studied in St. Petersburg, and then he came to Jerusalem to a special PhD program. He did 3 years, and he came back, and he's now in Dushanbe. He's the director. He's the director of the National Museum of Antiquities of Tajikistan, and he's one of the most important members of our team. And again, I really, one of the things that I always try to do, and this is something that I learned from Franz Grenet and from other people, is that especially in Central Asia, it is very important to invest resources in people, not only in monuments, not only in sites, but first of all in people, because without the people who study them, who protect them, who care about them, the monuments will be destroyed and nothing, and it's also very, very important for our field. So here I am with with Abdurrahman. Yeah, and finally, well, this year it was 11th season already at Sanjar-Shah. So, and of course, anyone who excavates a Sogdian site wants to find wall paintings. And finally, in 2022 and 23, we found fragments of wall paintings that I'm going to talk about them. Here they are. This is how it looks like in then you excavate them. And of course, again, life in the expedition, the car, and the connection that you form with local people. Yeah, and this is a family which lives close to our site, and this girl is now, I think that she's maybe 9 by now, but I remember her mother being a little girl. And again, things that are nice about Central Asia, and being an archaeologist in Central Asia, it's not only about the people, it's also about the food, which is great. And this is this is a photo from this season, together with Sharov and with Kamandir, who is a local farmer who lives close to the site and serves as its a guardian. Again, in recent years, also in addition to the excavations, because as scholars, especially in the university, we have to do at least 3 tasks. We are researchers, we're teachers, and we're administrators. And I've never seen anyone who is great in all these three in all these three areas. But nevertheless, this is what we were usually expected to do. And I also, again, in recent years, I try to advance the study of Central Asia, especially in Israel, but not only, and broadly speaking, and not limited only to the ancient period or to the archaeology. And last year, I was able to establish a program in Central Asian studies for the first time in Israel. And again, in recent years, I'm more and more trying to support also other research projects by other people in Central Asia, and to help them to work in Tajikistan and in Uzbekistan. And I'm concentrating very much on advancing contacts between my university of Jerusalem and universities in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. We've recently signed, for example, the Memorandum of Understanding with Samarkand State University. And so this is the journey that led me to Sogdiana. Again, then I started my PhD. I never expected that this would be one of the major fields. Of course, I continue and I sustain my research and my interest in Zoroastrianism, in the Kushans, in the Sasanians, and this is again something that I learned from Franz Grenet, not to be limited to only one period or one culture, but to try to understand and to be interested in the Iranian world, in the pre-Islamic Iranian world as the whole. And this is what I try to do. So of course I continue my interest in, I don't know, in fire temples and in Sasanian history and iconography, in the Kushan religion, and in other things. But because of my excavations, it brought me to the field of to this period, to the period of the Arab conquest, which I find often difficult because, again, I did not have this formation of Arabist that many people in the field have. So I try to approach it mainly from the based on the material sources. So thank you very much, and sorry for the for this long introduction. And I don't know, Istvan, we should have the questions now, or I should immediately start with the Arab conquest.
So normally, the pattern was that you continue, but
Okay.
I tend to intervene, and I will intervene now just for some questions and also some comments. One is that when we first discussed your talk, I asked you also to give some advice. There were advices in what you said, but you had a very specific and most interesting advice then. Which do you still remember, or shall I recall it for you?
Please, if you
So
can.
it was you said, and no one talked about this yet, that one of the frustrations of academic life is the delay which we have between research findings and publication and their dissemination. So people, what people know about us is always our past in some way. Yeah, yes,
No, no, no,
you,
no, no. Now I remember. Now I remember that. But that I think that was kind of general remark and complaint of about the academic life, and not something that is peculiar to, of course, to Islamic studies, Arab studies, Sogdian, or even to humanities. What I mentioned is one of the, I mean, for me, one of the psychological difficulties now in research is that you don't get to see the results of what you do immediately. You don't get the satisfaction to immediately to see the product of your labor. You write an article and you work on it for, let's say, I don't know, 3 months, and then you submit it to a journal. And if it's a good journal, then maybe 1 year, and it is published after 1 year, and then it is out. I mean, you don't feel anything about it. You already forgot. You're interested in, in something else and completely something which completely which is completely different. And for me, this is one of the most difficult aspects, psychological aspects of research. Again, you are working on the book for 10 years and you're exhausted until after all the revisions and the proofs and corrections until it finally goes to print, and then you wait and wait and wait, and then again, then it is suddenly, well, then finally published. Your mind is already in somewhere else, and you don't feel this sense of uh, satisfaction from what you did. I mean, this is at least how it works for me, and I find it quite difficult.
it happens to me that I finally publish it after years of work. It comes out and I don't like it anymore.
Yeah.
Then in some years I say, okay, it's not actually that bad. But so it was okay. But then when it comes out, sometimes it's and I open it, I find mistakes everywhere. But hopefully not everyone finds it immediately. Yeah,
Of course, this is why I don't like reading my. I think it is commonplace for many of us that we don't like to read our own publication, and it even happened to me once that I was looking for something, for some, you know, it happens then you look for some reference. You remember that you read it someone, but you just can't find it. And I wasted the entire day looking for this reference everywhere until I thought, oh no, maybe I'll open my book. And I reluctantly opened my own book. And of course, it was there at the plain sight. I discussed it, I mean, in great length, but my book would be the last, the last, the place where, because I'm so, you open it as you say, and you immediately see mistakes. You immediately see it's so immature. How could I have written this and that? And oh, yeah, so it even sometimes as you makes you feel bad reading or going back to your past publications.
I remember my supervisor Dominique Urvois. Once we had a supervisory meeting, and he quoted, I think, his supervisor while he was opening his book, and he said, Mais qu'est-ce qu'il écrit celui-là? what this one? Okay, let's see what this one wrote with a very very condescending uh, um, tone about himself. I really liked it. So just out of my tribal hunger, could you please mention what nationality, what was the roots of Professor Shaked by any chance?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I'll go back to it. Uh, well, he was born in Hungary, and then
Ah,
he came to in Hungary, and he came to Israel, and he was 1 year old. And But I mean, Hungarian identity was part of him also. He spoke Hungarian, although he always told me that somehow his Hungarian remained, he had Hungarian of a child. Um, on, but he was member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and I know that he gave presentations in Hungarian. Um, yeah. It was important for him.
it's for me a big miss because I invited him to a conference in Exeter, and he replied, I think 1 year later, horrified that he missed my message very kindly, very politely, but he said it was lost in his mailbox somehow, and I never had the joy to meet him. Though I'm very indebted to his work in my own research. Just sorry, don't want something on the generosity and what you said about Grenet,
Yeah.
and taking the difference in opinion positively. Franz de Waal, who is an ethologist and primatologist, in one of his book writes about the myth of modern science being as Grenet was, and or he is, and then he says that in reality most of scholars like as much as coming someone against their thoughts and established ideas, like finding a cockroach in their morning coffee. So it is not necessarily the general attitude of scholars to welcome someone who doesn't agree with them. And one last thing, which but I think it is important. You mentioned your imposter feeling as an imposter. Of course, you know it's widespread in academia to the point there is now very rightly a workshop in Exeter um, to tackle this feeling. But then I was thinking and about your journey, and I think somehow this imposter feeling is connected with intellectual curiosity, because the more you have this intellectual curiosity and this inquisitive mind, you will go to fields which are new for you, and then of course we always have to face this imposter. We are new to this. The field is new to us. We are new to the field, and then we feel we are not qualified. And
You know, but Istvan, in my case, it was really the opposite. I was not curious about this period. I tried not to be curious about it because I knew, as you well know, of course, we have a very strong school of Arabists, and of course, in early Islam in Jerusalem. And I knew very well that it is a separate field, and you know, it is they it it requires so much years and years and years of study. And my own background was again more in the classical period with ancient Greek and things like that. So in the beginning, I really resisted. I don't want to go there. I don't want because I don't. I mean, I don't know the sources. It's a completely new world, and I will be overwhelmed. I don't know these Arab historians. I never studied Islam, so I don't want to go there. But then the finds, the site uh, brought me there, dragged me there. But again, still, of course, because of my own formation, I come from somehow from outside. So I try to learn a lot from Arabists and to use their work as much as I can. But still, it sometimes, of course, feels like an imposter syndrome.
And and I don't want to take up more time of the lecture, but something else what from the very beginning you mentioned pictures, and that's also something very important. And imposter syndrome, and so I think it is immensely important to dare to make these steps. And another gap we often have it between textual studies and images and archaeology, and not to allow compartmentalism to restrain us, because then the knowledge we will produce will be always compartmentalized as well. So yes, those who study text, they shouldn't be afraid of images, and vice versa.
Yeah,
Michael,
yeah, of
yeah,
course, but again, then you also, then also then I entered, and I started the field of Iranian studies. I started to learn Middle Persian, and then the New Persian, and then I mean also later other Middle Iranian languages and Sogdian, but you know much better than me that in order to get not superficial but
yeah,
deep
that's true.
knowledge of Arabic sources, it takes much time and effort and years of. It's a very rich and complex and difficult tradition. This is why we have philologists.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to say a few words about Sogdiana, and I think how much time do I have? 20 minutes to talk about the most important things, or less, Istvan?
I think we can go on
Okay.
as you wish. 20 minutes is absolutely fine,
I
or more. If you
Be,
can't
be, be,
stay,
be
we can
be
stay.
careful, be careful. This semester I'm teaching an entire class on the Arab conquest, so I can go on for one semester. Okay,
Okay.
but I'll try to be brief. When we're talking about Sogdiana, we're talking about a historical region which is more or less modern parts of modern Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Here it is. The Sogdian civilization evolved in the valleys of Zarafshan and Kashkadarya river, and you're all familiar with at least two major urban centers of Sogdian culture, Samarkand here and Bukhara here, but other important Sogdian cities were Kesh, modern Kitab, Shahrisabz, and Nakhshab, here near modern Karshi, and of course the city of Panjikent, which we are going to mention frequently. And Sogdiana is a land of mountains and deserts, but most of all, fertile valleys surrounded by mountains and deserts and steppes, like this view of the Zarafshan Valley near Penjikent. And the Sogdian civilization was, of course, created by Sogdians, who were Iranian-speaking people, and we first hear about them, then they are included in the First World Empire of the Achaemenids in the 5th century BCE. And back then, the Sogdians are in no way different from their other Eastern Iranian neighbors like the Bactrians or Khwarezmians. They have more or less the same dress and so on. But by the time of the Arab conquests and the Arabs who arrive in Sogdiana in the 8th century meet in Sogdiana something completely different. They meet a unique civilization in the Iranian world, because starting from the 1st century CE, the Sogdians developed a civilization with several traits. And one of the results of this development was that they became the people who actually managed a complex network of economic, diplomatic, and cultural connections between China and Central Asia, which flourished in this period, in the first half of the first millennium, this system of networks that we usually call by the name the Silk Roads. And the people who physically in this period went from China to Central Asia and moved and established colonies and settlements and settled within the already existent regions were mostly Sogdians. Now, a few words about what is unique about the Sogdian civilization. Again, Said Reza spoke about Bactria, which was also divided between several small states. But Sogdiana was unique in the ancient Iranian world in the sense that in Sogdiana a real city-state culture emerged. And you can see here the definition of city-state cultures. We know examples, of course, of such city-state cultures from other historical periods and from other regions. Perhaps the two of the best best known such cultures, or maybe three, are Phoenicians, are the polis, the cities of classical Greece, and the city-states of Italy during the medieval period and Renaissance. And I would like you to note immediately three major features of many of such city-state cultures that they share in common. One is developed networks of trade. Second is colonization and settlement beyond the original region of city-state culture. And the third is self-governing civic communities that exist in these cities, in many of these cities. And in Sogdiana, we have exactly the same, just instead of the Mediterranean Sea of the Phoenicians, the Greeks, and the Italians, we have the steppes and the deserts of inner Asia. And what is so there was never a unified Sogdian state or Sogdian empire or Sogdian kingdom, where the Sogdians were united only when they were ruled by an external state, like the Kangju nomadic entity, like the Turks, or later the Arabs and the Hans before that. after the collapse of the Greek rule in Sogdiana, we slowly start to see the emergence of this city-state culture under the rule and the protection of the nomads. But what is more important is really the emergence of these self-governing civic communities. And this is where the Sogdians became different from other Iranian people. And the earliest evidence comes from the Kultabe inscriptions, which were found in the Sogdian colony, which is in modern Kazakhstan. Parts of the inscription which record the foundation of the city by someone who is the son of the leader of the Naf of Chach. And this Naf, which literally means people, we also meet much later in the Arabic sources, in the Arab sources and in Mount Moog documents, as the governing body of Sogdian cities. This civic communities probably evolved first in colonies, and only later they emerged in Sogdiana itself. You can see here a coin minted in Chach, modern Tashkent, with the legend Wanon Khwar, which is a personal name of the Naf, of the people of Chach. And when the Arabs arrive in Sogdiana, they meet this city-state culture of independent or semi-independent cities, which most of the cities, they do have kings, but the kings in Sogdiana were not absolute rulers. They couldn't pass their authority to their sons. Instead, they were part of this Naf, of this oligarchy, which consisted of nobles and probably wealthy merchants. If the Sogdians were not happy how the kings performed, the rulers performed, they could depose them and elect new ones. And actually, one of the consequences of the Arab conquests was the emergence of real dynasties in Sogdiana, because the Arabs they implemented in Sogdiana the structure that they knew from Khorasan, and they relied on the local nobles, on the local dikhans, as they were called in Islamic sources. Now we get to the Arab conquest. What makes I would say it rather differently. Sogdiana is the best place to study the dynamics of the early Arab conquests and the interactions and the impact of the conquest on local population. Why? Because of the sources. As strange as it may seem, we know about the Arab conquest of Sogdiana much more than we know about any other region during the early Arab conquest, including Iran, Iraq, and even Syria and places like, and many other places. Why? Again, because of the sources. First of all, the Arabic sources are very detailed. Of course, most of the sources were written and edited in the Abbasid period. The most important is Tabari. But these people who were of Iranian origin themselves, and they worked in Baghdad. They were very much interested in the history of Iran and of the Eastern lands, and this is another reason. So this is why the description of conquest of Central Asia, for example, in Tabari, is much more detailed than than many other places, but it was also much closer in time than the conquest of Iran, for example, the conquest of Central Asia, to the time when these sources were composed. It is really only during the conquest of Central Asia, then you read Tabari, then you get the sense of events on the ground. But not only that, Sogdian is the only place where we can also compare the Arabic sources and supplement them with very important local sources. We have this site of Mount Mook, you can see it here, close to Penjikent, where in the 30s an archive was found containing letters and parts of the archive of Divashtich, the prince of the Sogdian city of Penjikent, who was one of the leaders of the great anti-Arab uprising in 1721, 1722. Said Reza spoke about the Bactrian documents, which are, of course, also a very important source. And we have sources from Egypt, we have sources from Israel and from other places, primary sources, I mean. But these are mostly economic and administrative documents. Here, uniquely, we have diplomatic correspondence of one of the local leaders who was actually fighting against the Arabs. And this is something that we don't have in any other place. This is object from Mount Mook. And then, of course, archaeology. Again, nowhere else, only in Sogdiana, do we have such resolution of archaeological finds and material that allows us to shed light on the events of the Arab conquest. And I'm talking first of all about the material from the city of Penjikent in modern Tajikistan, which was conquered by the Arabs in 722. And it was partially destroyed. And Penjikent, it is one of the most excavated and continuously studied sites in the world. It is continuously excavated by the expedition from the Hermitage Museum from St. Petersburg since 47. And so we have a lot of material from Penjikent. Here you can see the citadel of Penjikent. Here you can appreciate the extent of the excavated areas in the city and the reconstruction of the city. And an example for instance, we can go together in the streets of Penjikent and we can say this house was burned by the Arabs in 722 and the neighboring house was not burned by the Arabs in 722. What does it mean? So this is really our resolution on the events of the Arab conquest, and of course from this period come a lot of material and a lot of anyone who studies Umayyad history, the history of the Umayyad period and even later, know that the iconography is often rare. We don't have many objects of art and representations, but from Sogdian culture, we have hundreds of fragments of wall paintings from this period. Again, this is something which is unique for Sogdian civilization. I can show you just some examples so you can appreciate the sophistication and the artistic refinement of this civilization and the wealth of the Sogdians in banquet scenes and epics like this, representations of exploits of Rustam, and the reconstruction of a typical Sogdian reception hall. But now really to the Arab to the Arab conquest, which again occupies me more and more in recent years because of what we have at Sanjar-Shah. It is important to emphasize, and Said Reza spoke a lot about also things that connect Bactria to Sasanian Iran and Khorasan in general. But here it was very different, because then the Arabs crossed the Oxus. They stepped into a completely different world. The Arabs were familiar with the Sasanian Empire. The Arabs served in the Arab army and so on. But once they crossed the river, they were in different geographical environment. And one of the major questions and one of the very interesting things about the story of the Arab conquest of Sogdiana is that it took the Arabs something like 15 years to conquer the mighty Sasanian Empire, but it took them almost 100 years to properly conquer and subdue this relatively small region of Sogdiana. And what are the reasons for that? Well, several factors explain why it took the Arabs so long to establish firm control in Sogdiana. And first of all, I brought you this quotation from that Tabari brings, and it is something that one of the experienced Arab generals tells one of the newly appointed governors of Khorasan. They change all the time. Then he wants to go on campaign in Sogdiana. He tells me the possessor of Khorasan ought not to cross the Oxus with less than 50,000 men. So what was so dangerous and what was so powerful beyond the Oxus? And another thing, I like this man very much, Nasser ibn Sayyar. After many struggles with the Sogdians, he was the last Umayyad governor who was finally able to pacify Sogdiana. He granted the Sogdians permit to return to the homes, and in 740s they returned and rebuilt, for example, Penjikent. And Nasr ibn Sayyar was criticized by Arabs for agreeing to all the terms that the Sogdians asked for them. And his answer, again, quote, according to Tabari, was the following: by God, if you had seen with your own eyes as I have done. And by then he was very experienced. He spent decades in Sogdiana. He was an old companion of the great conqueror of Sogdiana, Qutayb ibn Muslim. So he says, as I've done, the military prowess that the Sogdians displayed towards the Muslims and the havoc that they wrought amongst them, you would not have disapproved of this agreement. So what were the factors that because of them it took so long for the Arabs to conquer Sogdiana? Again, beyond the river was a region inhabited by peoples with different socio-political structures and modes of warfare, mostly unlike anything the Arabs had previously encountered. They knew very well the Byzantines and the Sasanians, but that was different. And two of the most significant peoples that the Arabs met in Mavaranakh were the Sogdians and the Turks, of course. So one of the key reasons was the distinctive social political organization of the Sogdians. And because it was not a unified state, the Arabs had to negotiate with each Sogdian city differently. And so the story really, when you read the story of the Arab conquest of Sogdiana, it is a prolonged and repetitive series of battles, sieges, negotiations, agreements, standoffs, and renewed hostilities, because each city had to be dealt separately and in many cases on more than one on more than one occasions, and many cities cooperated with the Arabs. The others pursued different polities. The second factor was the extraordinary wealth of the Sogdian city-states. It was proverbial. And if you read the Arab sources, they emphasize again and again that the Arabs took booty in Sogdiana like never, nowhere in Khorasan. And the Sogdian aristocracy and the merchant class could afford expensive arms and armor and were accordingly well equipped for war. And the Sogdian elite also had a heroic ethos, very much like to that of the Sasanian aristocracy, and we can see it in Sogdian mural paintings. It is one of the most important sources for the warfare in this period, and I'm currently writing an article about Sogdian warfare in the age of the Arab conquest, which again brought me to read many narratives and studies of the Arab conquest. And it's very interesting that recent studies that deal with the Arab conquest, they write a lot about organization and politics and social history and religion, but not really about warfare, which conquest was all about. Somehow this subject fell out of fashion. It was very fashionable, I think, before in previous years, but not anymore. So in addition, this aristocracy had, I can just show you the paintings of Sogdian warriors from this period. In addition, they possessed regiments of so-called chakar or shakiriya in Arabic. Later, this word came to mean servant in Persian, but originally it referred to a retinue of warriors who accompanied Sogdian aristocracy in battles, but also in banquet, and was bound to them by bonds of symbolic adoption. So the Sogdian armies were small, but they were very well equipped, and they relied on aristocratic heavy cavalry. A third factor, I would just like to show you some of the probable representations of this chakar. You see, this is the painting of one of the exploits of Rustam, the Iranian national hero, later immortalized by Ferdowsi in his Shahnameh. Anyone who knows Shahnameh knows that Rustam is a solitary hero in Shahnameh, but not in Sogdiana, because in Sogdiana, of course, every noble, every hero must be accompanied by a retinue, by chakar, and here we see what these warriors who accompany Rustam, probably his chakar. Here they are. And also, this is also probably a representation of chakar. This comes from the palace of Shahristan in Ustrushana, another important Sogdian region. You see, they're usually described as musicians because they play various musical instruments, but you can see that all of them have daggers and swords, which are, again, normal attributes of Sogdian aristocracy. So this can probably be also chakars, this retinue who accompanied Sogdian aristocracy. Another third factor was the presence of the Turks. The Arabs were very lucky to arrive in Sogdiana at the time when the Turks were at their lowest ebb, and the first Turk Khaganate had already collapsed, and there was no real power in the steppe. Only in later period we have a resurrection of the Turgesh Khaganate on a much smaller scale, but nevertheless, the Turks were the real nomads, and they were real Eurasian nomads, and it is the first time that the Arabs encountered this mode of warfare, and the results were difficult for the Arabs, because again it is still usually thought sometimes that the early Arab conquests were achieved by Bedouins. Well, in fact, the Arab armies mostly fought as a mobile infantry, and which again which by the way was an innovative way of warfare. But this is exactly what I'm writing in my article. But the Turks were formidable for, and they came and they intervened in the affairs in Sogdiana all the time. Yeah, here they are, Tafrasiab on Sogdian paintings. You see these people with long braids. These are the Turks. And additional factor is the internal struggles and conflicts among the Arabs. And as in the case of the second fitna, then again they were occupied with another things, and they lost the possessions in Sogdiana. And another problem was frequent changes in the governors of Khorasan, most of whom were outsiders with little knowledge of the region and its people, and their abilities varied greatly. Some, like Qutayba ibn Muslim, they were outstanding and capable commanders, while others, they really were less competent. And they were appointed by central government with different agendas, and many of these governors, they were more concerned with enriching themselves and advancing their careers than with establishing stable control. Sogdiana was one of the richest region, and they regarded it as an opportunity to make a career and make a fortune for themselves. It is described by one of the governors as the garden of the caliph. And finally, looming all over these struggles was distant but very much tangible presence of the Chinese Empire. That was really the only superpower which in this period was comparable with the Arabs. And although no Chinese troops ever set foot in Sogdiana and no direct imperial administration was established there, but we see that Sogdian princes always petitioned to the Chinese emperors and asked for the help of the against the Arabs. So it is a fascinating story. Yeah, this is the only place, by the way, where in Penjikent, where we have probable depictions of Arab warriors from the time of the conquest, and we have depictions of war machines like this manjanik, which according to the sources Qutayba used against his siege of Samarkand in 712. Here is another depiction. This is an unpublished fragment of people operating such manjanik. And finally, I will take a couple of minutes to talk about the contribution of our excavations from Sanjar-Shah, which is to the story of the Arab conquest, which is a small site. It is located 12 kilometers to the east of Penjikent. Here you can see the view of Sanjar-Shah, and yeah, and the excavated areas, and mainly the palace here. This is the watchtower. And one of the most interesting finds which were made before I took charge, it's a fragments of this, the fragments of 3 Arabic letters written on Chinese paper. This is the Arabic text, and this is the translation, which was published by Ofir Chaim, by myself, and by Sharof Kurbanov. And it is a fragment of some kind of correspondence. We think it is because of the correspondence between Arabic commanders stationed in the region. It is certainly from the 8th century, but unfortunately, we don't know, we can't date it exactly because all the historical materials, unfortunately, as you can see in this, in the lacunae, but the fact that they're written on the Chinese paper already makes them the earliest Arabic texts in the world written on paper. Of course, we have earlier Arabic texts from Egypt, from Iraq, but they're all either on papyri or on leather. Which of course makes sense because Sogdians were writing on Chinese paper at least since the 4th century and probably earlier. And here we see it is very interesting why we think that it is a correspondence between the Arab governors, because it mentions Amir, it mentions our brothers and our companions, and they all seem to refer to themselves by kunya. We see here certain Abu Masud, and then there is another probably Abu Yahya in other place. Unfortunately, again, we can't identify these people, historical characters, because of the kunyas. But as you know, in Arabic, kunya is a respectful but rather informal way of addressing someone. So this is why we think that the context here can be the correspondence between the commanders of the Arabic forces stationed in the region. But the major discovery related to this period was the palace, which we continue to excavate, and which has at least 2 periods, and the second period is subdivided in several sub-periods. The first period, it's 740. It is, and please pay attention, it is also one of the very interesting things, because all these paintings and monuments that I showed you, they're usually considered to be pre-Islamic monuments, monuments of pre-Islamic culture. And indeed, they somehow are products of Sogdian culture, which starts before the coming of Islam. But in terms of chronology and in terms of political control, we're in the end of the Umayyad period. And even later into, so this art and all this is very much part of already, I mean, it exists within the Islamic framework. So this palace was built in 740s. Then the Sogdians were allowed to return. I think that it belongs to the last king of Penjikent, who was not allowed by the Arabs to return to the city, but was given this place to build his palace. And yeah, I just like to show you the palace. And in terms of yeah, we have traces of burning and destruction. It was destroyed in 770s. And in terms of architecture, it is a typical Sogdian palace architecture, like in other Sogdian palaces that we know. Absolutely no influence, no Middle Eastern influence, no Arabic influence. The palace was lavishly decorated originally with with carved wooden elements that you can see here. Beautiful frieze with floral, geometric, and zoomorphic designs like these crouching mountain rams, and also wall paintings. At first, we found only small examples of wall paintings, very poorly preserved. probably from the hunting scene depicting lotus flowers, or this hoof of horse or a boar, probably a battle scene or the hunting scene. Here it is, and fragments of horse harness. But in last, again, when we excavated what we think was the main throne room of the palace, we found many fragments, well preserved, small fragments, but well preserved fragments of wall paintings, which depicted also heavily armored warriors. And this, yeah, this is the excavation of the paintings, which is very complex and labor-consuming process, which is performed by professional restorers of our team. And I will just show you the reconstruction of the scene, which we recently published. Is this. It's a unique scene of fire worship by Sogdian priests wearing mouth coverings like the Zoroastrian priests do today. And it's very interesting that someone who builds this palace here in 740 chooses to decorate his palace with a scene of traditional Sogdian fire worship. And what else I wanted to say? Do I have, Istvan, do I have 5 minutes, or I should stop? 5 minutes more?
Michael, we have you now here. So
oh, great. Great. So I will just show you really our new material from this year, which is familiar to some of you in the audience. Yeah, Brian, Ludovic, and John, who actually excavated physically. But this year we, and this is something really work in progress and completely new. When the palace was destroyed in 770s, it was immediately reoccupied, and seems that it was reoccupied by peasants, and everything completely changed. The economy, the material culture. But this year we excavated a Sogdian reception hall that you can see here. Very beautiful reception hall with these benches and the fire hearth with the podium, and most importantly, wall paintings. Poorly preserved, but we were able to figure out their subject matter, and in terms of style, it's a typical Sogdian paintings, but most interestingly, they don't belong to the palace, but they're later. So what we are now thinking, that we have another palace that existed after this first palace, original palace, was destroyed in 770s. We have another palace, some rooms were reoccupied, repainted, and it would be really very interesting because it brings us already deep into the Abbasid period. And final word, the Sogdian culture really, I have an article which is called The Collapse of the Sogdian Civilization. The Sogdian civilization really collapsed in the 8th and 9th century. By the 9th century, everything was finished. The Sogdian distinctive Sogdian art disappears. Sogdian religion is found only in villages. And it is not characteristic of the history of the early Arab conquest, because as we know, the Arab conquests were usually, they were not extremely violent, and the cities were not razed. They were not. Most of the cities were not destroyed, and the local cultures continued to flourish. And not only cultures of the people, I don't know, of the protected people of the book, like the Copts in Egypt, but also, for example, in Bactria. And again, I refer to the talk by Said Riza last 2 weeks ago, because, for example, in Bamyan and in Bactria and in other regions, for example, Buddhism continued to exist and even to develop and to flourish into the 10th century. But Sogdian religion was finished and art very quickly collapsed. So it was because that the Sogdian civilization and its unique features were produced by its unique socio-political structures of civic communities. And the first thing the Arab did, they dismantled these communities and they established decans, they established aristocracy, and they entrusted them with the collection of taxes, which before that they didn't do, and also other things that we see that happens in Sogdiana. So I'll end here. I hope that I was able to show you at least a little bit that Sogdiana is the place to go if you are interested in the dynamics of the early Arab conquest. And I'll be happy to answer any questions or to elaborate on any of these points, because of course it is our material is so rich, it's impossible to present it within one lecture. So thank you.
Michael, before I close the recording, could you please just tell about this last bit of the conquest and this
About
of the conquest and the dismantling of the Sogdian civilization? Do you think this was premeditated by the, because by the time the Arabs finally managed to conquer, they suffered such heavy losses that they learned what they should do, or it was accidental somehow because they wanted to establish a system which worked, and this system dismantled the old one?
I think that they just brought with them the system that that was functioning in Khorasan, in the Sasanian Khorasan, where this local aristocracy was established as a mediator between local population and the Arabs, and they were responsible for collecting taxes. Something, for example, that probably the kings and rulers in Sogdiana didn't do before. We have, for example, one very important evidence from Mount Moog documents, where we see that there is a bridge near Penjikent, and they charge money for crossing the bridge, and the money goes not to Devashtich, the ruler of Penjikent, but to Naf of Penjikent, to the local community. But I think that what the Arabs did, they introduced the system from Khorasan, because of course they were also accompanied by many people from Khorasan. By many Mawali and others who came from Khorasan, and of course, eventually it is the culture of Khorasan that conquered Sogdiana and came to dominate it, not the Arab culture, but the culture of Khorasan.
Thank you. That's a fantastic reply and a fantastic close to the talk itself. I want to thank you for and stop the recording, and then we are, if you still have time, Michael,
Yeah, sure.
then we are heading to probably a very interesting discussion. Thank you.